Good afternoon, everybody. As Jason mentioned, I'm going to host the debate. We're going to have 4 panelists who are going to talk about virtual racing and is it an opportunity or a threat for the world of horse racing. So I'd like to invite our 4 panelists up on stage. We have Paul Cross from Tabcorp, Lorenzo Stoppini from SNAI, Mikael Hagberg from ATG, and Witek Wacinski from Inspired. So, Witek, I think we'll start off with you just to explain a little bit. So, can you explain to us a little bit about virtual racing? How did it first evolve, and why did it come about in the first place?
Yeah, of course. Hello? Is it working? Hello?
Try the other one if not.
Testing. Oh, it works. Oh, great. Thank you. May I perhaps first ask for a show of hands how many people are familiar with virtual sports or virtual racing?
So a show of hands, people who are familiar with virtual racing.
So about half, 50%, 60%? So just to start off, so virtual sports, virtual racing are essentially animated sporting events, short animated sporting events that people can bet on, where the outcome is determined by a random number generator. So it's pure games of chance. They happen every 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how the operator sets them. And they can be displayed either in shops, agencies, or online and mobile. They first evolved in UK in 2001. I mean, in the UK. Perhaps in Australia they have evolved earlier. After a foot and mouth disease caused a cancellation of races, so there was no content. Operators couldn't actually display anything that people could bet on. And they have started working with Red Vision, the company at the time that was later acquired by Inspired, to provide them with content. Since then, they have realized that actually it's quite a nice product to have on its own terms as a complementary product or a product on a dedicated channel. And we have released dogs, numbers games, and then football in 2006. Now the product turns over for our customers over $10 billion per year, and we can work on such amazing content as boxing with Mike Tyson and soon to be basketball with Shaquille O'Neal.
Paul, do you have anything? I know that you're representing Tabcorp in Australia. It's been a slightly different evolution over there.
Yeah, so we kicked off about 1999 with our first virtual product. And it's a homegrown product, and it's purely virtual racing for thoroughbred racing, harness racing, or greyhound racing. So we've been able to grow that product over the last 16 odd years. And the last time I looked, which was about 2 days ago, we still haven't had an abandoned meeting. We still haven't seen a track that's heavy. We still haven't seen any scratchings. And we still haven't seen any protests. So it's been there for a while now, and as the previous speaker said, we regard it as highly complementary to our live racing product.
Would you say that it provides additional content for the people, for existing players, or does it attract new people into betting?
The thing we have found is it's a bit like, racing's a bit like relationships. It's complicated. And over again, we see from new customers, the reaction to betting on racing has always been, it's way too complicated. And so we see quite a few new customers, particularly more of the female variety, that want to experiment with a virtual racing game that virtually mirrors what's available on live racing. So for our product in Australia, you can take a win bet, place bet, quinella bet, trifecta bet, or a first 4 bet. And there are 12 runners for every single race. Number 1 will always pay $4. Number 12 will always pay $35. And it gives you a chance to, from a new customer, to actually experience betting. And what we've seen is that customer then comes across to racing or live racing. So it's a way that we've been able to use to get people to bet on live racing as opposed to virtual racing.
Okay. Yeah, Witek.
If I can perhaps provide some insight from our market research that we've done in various countries, and I'll be interested to hear what Paul has to say about that as well from the Australian market. The way we categorize our players is into 3 types. You have people who are time fillers, so essentially punters that come into the agencies online, and they predominantly bet on live racing or live sports. But in between events, they want to have a crack on something else. They want to prolong their entertainment. They get bored, or they just want to try something new. And kind of the virtual sports really enhance their overall experience on the operators' operations. Then you have the bad luck breakers. So those are the punters who bet almost exclusively on live racing and sports, but they've had a bad run of a couple of races, and they feel like they want to do something. They want to try their hand at something that doesn't require any skill, just pure game of chance for a couple of minutes. And then you have people who play just virtual. So that's something that we've seen increasingly in various jurisdictions that we operate in. For example, Italy, where you have people that come into the shops and onto websites, and they're not interested in live racing. They want to try, they actually try out virtuals first. And then as they get more acquainted with the betting type product, they start trying out live racing as well. So it's kind of a introductory educational product for them.
Mikael, as regards ATG, do you think that this is an additional source of revenue for you to have virtual racing?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we view this as a purely complementary product for mostly our existing customers. And we know that these customers, if we didn't have the product, these customers would go out to other platforms, to our competitors, and use similar products or at least products that give them the same kind of feeling. So when we introduced this, we've seen that our share of wallet has gone up, and we haven't seen any signs of cannibalization from the actual horse racing, which is always going to be our primary and most important product.
I know in Sweden you have a lot less races than, let's say, in Australia, as Paul will talk, I'm sure, about it afterwards. So do you use the virtual racing as a filler content, or is it going on as a separate entity?
It's not a filler content in terms of in the TV channels or in the broadcasts, but of course it helps us to fill out and give our customers more entertainment before the races start during the day, between the races, and most importantly after the races finish. So Paul, I'm really jealous for you having races every third minute. We don't have that in Sweden, so virtuals has been very important to actually sort of widen the products that our customers can bet on.
Paul, you were saying to me earlier that virtual racing in England is run in between races as a filler. You were saying in Australia, as you're saying, races every 3 minutes, so it's not the case with you.
Yeah, so in the UK market, we call it a linear model, which is live, virtual, live. Whereas in Australia, we do it differently. We have our trackside product on one place in the betting shop, and our live racing in another part of the betting shop. So there's no interaction between the two. You make a choice as to what you want to do or how you want to play the game.
Okay, and Lorenzo, can you explain a little bit about how it works with you with SNAI, how the virtual racing, how it is for you?
SNAI is a big operator in Italy. I should say the biggest, because we have more than 40% of market share on virtuals and similar market share on other betting products. And we tried with virtual sports in 2013 at the end with them, and we were very shocked by the results, because we noted a big interest on that. Let's consider that we have more than 400 millions of turnover per annum, and this comes from small bets, 2.5 euros as an average. So it means that they make a lot of bets. And what we noted, because you have to consider that I am the manager of this activity, but I live in Pisa, and I am 100% racing people, because I live in Pisa, meaning the same city of Ribot and so on. And I was shocked of that, and I tried to understand if this might impact on racing, and how this might be used by us to attract new people to races. And we try to use this form that with virtual bets you entertain you, but with racing bets you are involved in the race, because all the things that you said are true, but at the end of the race you have not the idea of bet again that horse that has lost the race. And this happens in the real races and not in the virtual. And so, for example, we decided not to have a big offer of races. We have football. And I think that it seems crazy to observe people that have the same match, let's say Juventus against Milan, that we call Old Lady against Devil, that is the simulated name, and you have here 105% of prizes, and there 120%, but they bet on this. So it means that they entertain them, and what we noted is the last aspect that I want to tell to this panel, is that they don't bet alone. If you are alone, you don't bet on virtuals, and you need people with you. So it means that they're really having fun. And so the reason why we decided a new name for horses and greyhound and so on, like the names of possible women and the daughters and things like this, because you choose your selection because of that.
So it's a bit like a newcomer to the races who picks their favorite horse because of the colors or because of the name of the horse.
Yes, that's true. But considering Italy, you have to remember always that we have no casinos. We have only 4 licensed casinos, and not not in Milano, not in Rome.
And Mikael, do you think that this is a generational issue, that it's the younger generation that are more interested in betting on virtual racing?
No, I wouldn't say. I would rather say that it's a matter of how people place bets. It evolves over time. So of course the young people, they come and they drive the need for instant satisfaction, for example. But it has more to do with changings of behaviors rather than the young crowds coming in. But we have seen actually the people who play our virtual product, they are 8 years younger than the average of the other ones, so which is good because we need to get our customer base younger. So it's a positive thing.
And do you see that those people eventually, the younger people that you brought in, eventually bet on racing? On real, like live racing, not virtual?
They've come from live racing, so they start off from live racing and then they migrate and they start playing virtuals as well as the other racing. So virtuals in Sweden has not been a huge magnet for attracting new customers to our company.
And Paul, with you in Australia, have you seen that it's working the same way, that people are getting disinterested with live racing and going to virtual, or that virtual is bringing new customers into live horse racing?
It's a small part of our business, but what we do see quite often in our shops is the husband will be betting on live racing and the wife will be betting on trackside and all the trackside virtual
Have we done a study into why the women are betting that way?
It comes back to it's complicated. It's taking the complexity out of...
I take offense to that. So the women only do the easy one.
Yeah, well, maybe, yes. Well, I mean, it's complicated for those punters who don't bet. I'll get out of trouble now. For those punters who are not normally punters, the biggest thing that we find is that, and take Melbourne Cup Day, where it's very social, so it's a social aspect to bet on racing. 100% of Australians will bet on Melbourne Cup Day. Why? Because it's socially acceptable to bet on Melbourne Cup Day. The biggest challenge we've got is how do we get the 80% who don't bet on other days over to that market? And so taking the complexity out of that. So to try and get myself out of trouble, what I was saying was that it's those new customers who are not used to the product. And that's why
it is true, though, that racing in general is complicated for a complete newcomer. Regardless of the betting, it's an entirely different language than the person on the street is used to speaking.
Yes, true. And for most of us in the room, we've been around for a while, and we sort of tend to say, well, you know, having a win bet's quite easy. Surely it can't be that difficult, but it is difficult. And not only from a trackside or virtual racing point of view, we see a lot of participation on sports betting. And again, the same sort of thing happens. We tend to get a younger audience in sports betting, female-orientated audience. And why is it that way? Because, again, it's a new customer coming in. It's less complicated. So for a game, it's either win, lose, or draw. So it's much simpler for the customer.
Witek, maybe you answer. How would you see this developing? How do you think virtual racing will develop over the coming years? What is the future for it?
I think the future is more of what we see right now, of virtuals growing in jurisdictions where it's not yet present, and being a solid part of a portfolio where it is present. It's not going to be a primary product in a betting operator, I don't think, but it's a very nice supplementary, complementary product to live offering.
Okay. Mikael, maybe you can say what is the effect that will have on racing, the growth of virtual racing? What is the effect it'll have on the horse racing world?
I guess we make more money, which brings more money to the horse racing industry. So it's a good thing for us in Sweden, at least. We're very positive. We're also positive about it being a small product in our portfolio, but still an important step, and for us to broaden the portfolio and to actually grow the share of wallet on our existing customer base.
How do you think that this technology could turn into a benefit for racing? I know you've said it'll bring more money, but you think that it can be turned around so it won't have a bad effect on racing in the long term?
Yeah, of course, we can learn a lot from it and how it is presented. First of all, I need to say that we only have it online. We don't have it land-based. And I mean, we as an organization learn a lot about how the customers are playing and what kind of the little number of new customers that we get. We learn and see how they behave. So at ATG now we're experimenting with using a virtual engine to represent races and to help people get the result from races. So the 25% of our customer base who's not really super interested in seeing the race, they just want to place their bet and they want to get the result. You can use a virtual engine and what we learned from that to get the results presented in a very interesting way and an exciting way for these customers.
Lorenzo, do you see that it could have a negative effect? I know racing in Italy isn't very healthy at the moment in general. Do you think that virtual racing could be an advantage or disadvantage to the Italian racing industry?
My opinion is that this might be an advantage because we are keeping people inside these shops, while probably in some occasion, because our offer of racing, they might go away, but they stay. What we are doing is to move in the two different products on virtual sports, to try to offer something very simple, very easy to be understood. The graphics are not a must, in our opinion. On racing, we have another approach that someone that is here knows, our approach that is trying to give to all the punters the same information. Because one of the reasons why probably someone decide to bet at 100.20 instead of 100.05 is because they have all the information, because they know that the price is the right price, even if it is high price, but right. And the problem is, let's talk about football, that you bet on a team. For example, yesterday night, Inter, that played against Sparta of Praga, without the two main players. The price is obviously done because of that, but many occasional punters don't know this. And what we are trying to do to improve racing is to give more information, all the information that we can.
Okay. Paul, just to come back to you, there are a lot of arguments against virtual racing, especially from racing purists. Do you think that it has a benefit in generating interest in the real horse racing experience?
Well, there's two elements to it. One is that, and I think we've all agreed, that it brings new customers into the betting shop. That's one angle. So eventually those customers come across the racing. The elephant in the room is, in fact, how does racing get a share of the revenue that comes from virtual racing? And in Australia, we're lucky because we've got a joint venture with the racing industry. So we share the revenue that comes from trackside, the virtual product. So yes, there were a few arguments when it first came out, but a lot of that was negated by the fact that there was a revenue flow back to the racing industry. So that's good where you've got, for example, PMU or the Hong Kong Jockey Club or the Singapore Turf Club, or in fact ATG, because the profits tend to flow back to the racing industry. It's more difficult in a market like the UK where there is no, to my knowledge, no revenue flow back to the racing industry from virtual racing. So often the view is there's $1 to be spent, and the racing industry would rather have the $1 spent on live racing versus virtual racing. But we sort of see it's complementary to that. But the trick is to get funding out of the virtual racing product.
Witek, just to finish up with you, we've heard about esports from Théophile Monnier. He has explained a little bit more to all of us who were ignorant about esports before. How do we ensure that racing remains relevant to this new audience that that are fascinated by things like esports?
Sure. I think virtual sports could actually be the gateway product, because esports are different. They're a live sports product, so they're more comparable to live horse racing or live football, right? The dynamics are the same, except that with esports, you pretty much have unlimited content, so there's never an issue with you not having something to bet on. But those players that, as Theophilus said, have never seen a horse, they may be more interested in initially betting on a virtual horse, getting educated on the betting product, and perhaps trying out the real thing.
Okay, thank you very much to our panelists. I'm sure you'll all agree this is a very interesting subject that we'll all have opinions on, and I think Jason will be able to find some people in our audience who have an opinion one way or another on virtual racing.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in exploring any of those that perhaps voted against. Obviously, we've got a panel of experts there on the stage, but they're all put the argument really for virtual racing. But I'm interested particularly from those who perhaps represent racing authorities who don't necessarily share in the income from virtual racing, what their view might be. I know we've got a couple of them here. I see one over there. I might go and speak to Nigel Roddis, who's from the BHA. He'll be able to give us a view in the UK where the model's slightly different.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, always come back to the UK. Paul's right. I mean, we don't get any revenue from virtual racing, and it's interesting hearing ATG and Tabcorp talking about using it as a feeder in. And they get the revenue, and it goes back to the industry. We don't get that revenue, but we also have to face on a daily basis competition from other sports, competition from fixed odds betting terminals. It's just competition, really. And I suppose one of the interesting things is listening about how you migrate that customer, even when you're getting revenue from it, to ultimately bet on live racing. And whilst we might not get the revenue, what we can, I suppose, learn from is some of those lessons about simplicity, how the data's shared, how the results are shown, such that we can make the sport of racing less complex, so that perhaps more females might bet on it. Paul.
Thank you, Nigel. Are there any others, any other racing authorities, or perhaps anyone else who wants to put the counter view where they think it's perhaps more of a threat, and they would have voted against in our initial question that we posed at the start? So let's just take a measure again. We're going to compare the results then. So if you go back on the web app for us, virtual racing is an opportunity or a threat. Go on the web app survey. We're going to check to see what your views are now before and after the debate. So if you could click on the survey and please again answer the question, are you for or against virtual racing? And we'll, once we've taken questions from the floor, compare the results. So any other questions please for our panelists? I think we have another microphone. The gentleman in the middle.
Well, I got a question about responsible gaming. Have you added up a responsible gaming program into this kind of product when you launched it to the market?
I can answer what we did in Sweden. So to start with, we have the responsible gaming, the budgets and all of that stuff online, which is sort of the basics of the care that we should take. And then we added some extra features specifically on virtual racing, which is a specific budget and a specific time limit, and also a specific function to lock yourself out of being able to play whatsoever. So that's what we've done. And we are considering to increasing that slightly more with some more features and twists.
Any other questions for our panelists? Also interested to hear from anyone who's developing their virtual product, perhaps looking at exploring other areas like fantasy racing and so on. I know they have certain opportunities they've been exploiting in the US, for example, in this area. Is there anyone else to pose questions for our panel? Got another question there, please.
Hello. It's not much of a question, but more of an opinion on how you could cater to a younger audience. I'm from Better's Rift, one of the virtual betting platform on esports that we saw earlier. And what I can say as far as working with like a younger audience that is more digital native is that you still have to get them interested with live products. The idea is that people will not bet, or I don't think that my generation would bet on virtual products alone, but they need something to engage on a also very real level. From my background, I have some of my relatives that are into the horse ecosystem, being riders. And I can say that one very interesting way that I could see people to get interested in horse racing at a younger age is maybe some sort of competition or marketing really targeted at a younger audience. Namely, more of a female audience, especially in France, because it's a very female world, the horse ecosystem in France. And I see very well a product or a competition and even a racing and betting system that is aimed at a younger audience with a more like maybe casual focus than a very professional one.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to question our panel? We have a gentleman here. Hold on one second.
Are any of you guys thinking about or developing games that utilize your existing database of races? Because it feels like a lost opportunity when you talk about how you get share back to the racetracks, and any track that's been recording for, let's say, up to 20 years, definitely for the last 5 years, is going to have thousands of races. And if it's really the virtual races is really trying to make the most race-like experience and give a betting experience that's one instant and one simplified without horse names, and you don't even need real odds, maybe just blocks of favorite or field or long shot. It seems like it's an opportunity that our company spent a lot of time with, and we're really interested in. The one challenge is getting access to all the races, which the racetracks have, but using the historic races in a product like this.
I suppose the best example is instant racing in the US. Depending on who you're talking to, it's going quite well, and I could be wrong. So, so we've looked at it, but it's a question of whether that applies to your market or not. But it's something we've looked at.
We would like to do it, but we're not allowed to. But it's a good thing, and it would be brilliant if you could use old races to actually bridge the gap between real racing and virtuals, because that would be sort of the product that is missing in the middle there, if you see what I mean.
May I answer on my side? We consider this possibility because in Italy it is clearly written on the law that you can use virtual races or pre-recorded races. And we have inspired as a supplier, so in this moment we have not pre-recorded races, but obviously we contacted many other suppliers to try to have this. But considering the number of races per day and the number of races in the database, because we had 10,000 races, but in my opinion they are not a so big number if you consider that people is always the same, and that you have to provide at least 100 races per day. So it's possible that you recognize the same race, and you have to change every time the silk of the runners. So you bet with a color, but you have another color after the closing of the bets. And the final problem, in my opinion, is that what is the virtual products is that they are fast. It is very fast. As I said before, and as he said, they promise something and they pay immediately. If you keep a real race, let's say a Gold Cup, do you think that someone wants to watch the Gold Cup after having bet randomly? I don't think so. So we are doing something with them, and you will see this, that is trying to conjugate these two problems. But I personally don't believe that this is a real possibility. It might be something that you had, let's say, 10% of races per day, but not more.
I think it's an interesting angle. In the UK, we have race nights, which are quite popular, you know, and it's very much a social occasion. And Mikael mentioned this earlier, that it is a social interaction with racing that attracts people to the virtual product, I think, as much as anything else. And we saw that in Italy as well. So perhaps there is something that can bridge the gap between the virtual and the real racing world in that way.
Let's say what we do. Every Sunday in the morning, we show to the customers with broadcasting all the main races of the day. And during this period, we propose a virtual race in which we say, okay, we say that the number of today is number 4 because it might win in this and this race, a real race. So let's try to bet the 4 in this virtual race. This is a way in which we try to connect the two things. But of course, we show before the virtual race a real race in which we say what I said before. Look at this horse. Do you want to bet this next time? Because I think that racing is the product that we know as a bigger lifetime, because we don't know which is the lifetime of virtual. You said 99, so I'm happy because now we have 3 years and I know that they will survive for a period. But I'm sure that racing is bigger than anyone else. So, and why is bigger? Because you bet every time the horse that you bet last time, usually.
There's definitely some interesting angles to explore there about how we can perhaps use virtual to bridge the gap with real racing. Any more questions from the floor? No? Well, we'll take a look then at our survey results. So we asked you before the panel discussion whether you were for or against virtual racing. We might have a slight bias in the room here. I think there's probably more betting organizations than racing, but you can see there it's quite interesting. There's an even split there, really. For, we have 52.7%, and against 47.3%. So it's 50-50 in the room, which is very interesting. So that's before the debate. If we now look at the figures after, and you can see it's slightly changed. We have for 53.3%, against 44.4%, and then, I guess, undecided 2.2%. So actually, we have shifted it there slightly during the course of the debate, persuaded a couple of you perhaps that there is an opportunity here, but there's a large chunk that are still against virtual racing, which is an interesting one, because I think it's something that we have to take seriously. As we heard from our first speaker, the esports opportunity is also going to be a threat unless we wake up to that for the younger generation. So it's an interesting argument that I think will go on and on. But thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you to Sally Ann.